What if I told you there is a product that needs no soil, no sunlight, no refrigerator, no pesticides, no fertilizers, and no months-long logistics chain? A product that is ready to eat within 5 minutes of deciding to prepare it. A product that costs next to nothing, stores for years, and yet surpasses in nutritional value most of what sits on supermarket shelves today. This product exists. It is called mung bean sprouts. And the food industry is doing everything it can to keep you from thinking about it. Not because it is dangerous, not because it is ineffective, but for one simple and very old reason. There is no money to be made from it. It cannot be patented. Scarcity cannot be manufactured. A multi-level distribution chain cannot be built around it. And it is impossible to convince people that without a branded package and a barcode, it is somehow not real food. So it gets ignored. Deliberately, systematically, and very consistently. Now let us talk about what you think of as fresh. You walk into a supermarket, you pick up a bunch of spinach, green, beautiful, moist. You grab a bell pepper, shiny, firm, bright. You take a bag of arugula, the label says fresh, and you walk home feeling like you bought something alive. But here is what you do not know. That spinach was harvested 8 to 10 days ago, most likely in another country. It was chilled to a few degrees to slow decomposition, packed in a modified atmosphere with reduced oxygen, loaded into a container, hauled across borders, unloaded at a distribution warehouse, chilled again, delivered to stores, and now it sits under fluorescent lights that continue to destroy the little that remains inside it. Vitamin C in leafy greens begins breaking down within the first hours after harvest. After 2 days, a third of it is already gone. After a week, half. After 10 days, the question is not how much is left, but is there any left at all? And that is the best case scenario, because many vegetables are additionally treated with preservatives, wax coatings, and gases to maintain color. Not to preserve nutritional value, to preserve appearance, so that you see a beautiful pepper and believe it is fresh. You are paying for the illusion of freshness and receiving beautifully packaged decoration in return. Now enter the supplements industry, $170 billion a year. That is the size of the global dietary supplements market, more than the entire economy of many countries. Vitamin C in capsules, vitamin D in tablets, multivitamin complexes with bioavailable forms, protein powders with enhanced amino acid profiles, collagen in sachets, omega in gelatin capsules, and all of it is sold with one single message. Your food is not good enough. You need something extra. You need help. Buy our help. Do you know what happens when mung beans are sprouted for just 3 days? The vitamin C content rises by 24 times. Not by 24%, by 24 times. A simple glass jar, a piece of cheesecloth. A handful of beans costing a few cents. And 3 days later, you have in your hands one of the most nutritionally dense products obtainable without a laboratory, without a factory, and without a subscription to yet another wellness brand. No capsule can compete with a living product in which nutrients have just been synthesized. Right now, right in your jar, right there in your kitchen. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is economics. The system is not evil. It is not malicious. It is simply built in a way that profits from complexity, from chains, from intermediaries, from your dependence on it. And when a product appears that removes you entirely from that dependence, the system does not promote it. Quietly, without explanation, it simply does not promote it. Mung bean sprouts are a hole in the system, a loophole that has not been closed yet because it cannot be closed. This is living biology operating by its own laws and requiring no one's permission. Next, I will tell you where this product came from, what exactly happens inside a bean at the moment of sprouting, and why NASA included it in the diet of astronauts aboard the International Space Station. 4,000 years ago, on the territory of what is today called India, people already knew something important. They did not know the word antioxidant. They did not read scientific journals. They had no gas chromatographs or mass spectrometers, but they observed. Patiently, generation after generation, they watched what happened to people who ate certain foods. And one product stood out so dramatically that it received a special status. Ayurvedic medicine, one of the oldest medical systems in human history, called mung beans mudga, and granted them a title that almost no other product had ever received, the king of beans. This was not poetic exaggeration. This was a clinical recommendation. Ayurvedic physicians prescribe mudga to people recovering from illness, to children with weakened digestion, to the elderly whose bodies could no longer handle heavy food, to pregnant women, to anyone who needed to receive maximum nutrition with minimum strain on the body. Texts from that era describe mung beans as a product that is easily digested, purifies the blood, and strengthens the body without overburdening the digestive fire. They did not know the mechanism, but they knew the result with absolute certainty. From India, mung beans moved east, first to China, where they became the foundation of an entire direction of cuisine and medicine. Traditional Chinese medicine used them to cool heat, which was how inflammatory processes in the body were described at that time. Mung bean sprouts became an inseparable part of Chinese cuisine more than 2,000 years ago. They appear in every region, every province, every family. Then Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines. The entire Asian continent adopted this product and wove it into everyday diets so organically that today it is impossible to imagine Asian cuisine without sprouts. Pad Thai, Vietnamese pho, Korean banchan, Indonesian gado-gado. Everywhere, they are there. 4,000 years of continuous use. This is not a trend. This is not a fad. This is a test of time that almost no other product on the planet has passed. But all of this is history. Now let us talk about the science, because this is where things get truly interesting. The year 2012. Cornell University, one of the world's leading research centers in food science. A team of scientists decides to study in detail exactly what happens to a mung bean during the sprouting process. Not approximately and not presumably, but with precise measurements, control groups, and reproducible results. The results are published, and they turn out to be so impressive that they are cited again and again. Vitamin C, an increase of 24 times, not by 24%, exactly 24 times. A dry bean contains a negligible amount of vitamin C. A sprouted bean after 3 days is a complete source of ascorbic acid, comparable to citrus fruits. Antioxidants, an increase of 6 times. These are compounds that neutralize free radicals, unstable molecules that damage cells, and are linked to premature aging, inflammation, and the development of chronic disease. Folate, an increase of nearly 4 times. Folate, or vitamin B9, a critically important substance for cell division, nervous system function, and especially for fetal development in the first weeks of pregnancy. And these are only 3 indicators among many. Total protein becomes more bioavailable. Iron is absorbed better. Zinc better. Magnesium better. But why? What exactly happens inside a bean when it begins to sprout? Here is the mechanism, and it is beautiful in its simplicity. A dry bean is a survival capsule. Inside it, the entire genetic program of the future plant is packed and sealed. But alongside the nutrients, protective compounds are also packed in. Substances the plant uses for self-defense. The main ones are phytic acid and trypsin inhibitors. Phytic acid binds minerals, iron, zinc, calcium, magnesium, and makes them unavailable for absorption. You eat a bean, you think you are getting iron, but the phytic acid has already captured it and will carry it out of your body without letting it be absorbed. Trypsin inhibitors block the enzyme trypsin, which breaks down protein in the intestine, meaning the protein is there, but the body cannot disassemble it into amino acids. These are anti-nutrients, literally, substances working against nutrition. When a bean enters water and begins to sprout, the biological program of germination is activated. The plant decides that the time to grow has come, and the very first thing it does is neutralize its own defense mechanisms. Phytic acid is broken down. Trypsin inhibitors are deactivated. At the same time, enzymes are activated that begin synthesizing vitamins, especially vitamin C and folate, because they are needed for building new cells. The bean is literally beginning to produce nutrition for itself, and at that moment you eat it and receive all of that production for yourself. Now, medicine, because the Cornell study was not the only one. Research published in the journal Chemistry Central Journal showed that extracts from mung bean sprouts demonstrate pronounced anti-cancer activity in laboratory conditions, specifically against stomach and colon cancer cells. The mechanism is the induction of apoptosis, the triggering of a self-destruction program within cancer cells. A separate body of research is dedicated to the effect on blood pressure. Peptides formed during the breakdown of mung bean proteins act similarly to a class of drugs used for hypertension, ACE inhibitors. They help relax the walls of blood vessels and lower pressure without synthetic chemistry, without side effects, without a prescription. Anti-inflammatory properties. Several studies recorded that regular consumption of sprouts reduces markers of systemic inflammation, C-reactive protein, and interleukin-6. Chronic inflammation is today called the common denominator of most age-related diseases, from type 2 diabetes to Alzheimer's disease. And finally, an argument that is difficult to ignore. NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, an organization that sends people to a place where every kilogram of cargo costs tens of thousands of dollars, where there are no stores, where there is no logistics, where every product undergoes years of testing for effectiveness, safety, and efficiency. NASA included mung beans in the nutrition program aboard the International Space Station, not because astronauts feel nostalgic for Asian cuisine, but because this is maximum nutrition at minimum weight, volume, and resources. Because from 1 kilogram of dry beans, you can produce fresh food indefinitely, simply by adding water. Because no other product delivers such a ratio of nutritional density to simplicity of production. If it is good enough for space, perhaps it is good enough for your kitchen. In the next part, I will show you the exact protocol. 5 steps. No equipment. No experience required. And in 5 days, a jar packed with living food that you grew yourself. Let us get one thing straight from the beginning. You are not going to be gardening. You do not need a plot of land, a raised bed, a pot of soil, or even a windowsill with decent sunlight. You do not need to understand agronomy, monitor air humidity, or buy special grow lights. What you are about to do is not growing in any conventional sense of the word. This is the activation of a biological program that is already written inside every single bean, a program shaped by millions of years of evolution and refined to absolute perfection. Your job is not to create conditions for life. Your job is simply to not get in the way. The bean will do everything itself. All you need to do is give it water and not block the air. That is literally all. But this is exactly where most people make mistakes. Not because the process is complicated, but because no one ever explained 2 or 3 critical moments that determine the outcome. Today, I will explain all of them. Step 1. Choosing your container. Take a glass jar with a wide mouth. 1 liter is ideal. Half a liter will also work to start. Why glass? Because it does not interact with the contents, it is easy to clean, and it allows you to see what is happening inside. You will be watching the process, and that matters not only practically, but psychologically. When you see day after day how tiny white tails grow longer, it changes your relationship with food. But more on that later. Why a wide mouth? Because sprouts need to breathe. A narrow neck creates stagnant air, raises the humidity inside, and produces conditions you do not want. A wide mouth means ventilation, and ventilation means life. No special sprouting jars from the internet, no expensive systems, an ordinary jar that once held jam or pickles. That is everything you need. Step 2. A lid that breathes. This is one of the 2 critical moments that people most often overlook. The jar needs to be covered, but not sealed. Covered in a way that keeps out dust and insects while allowing air to circulate freely. The simplest solution is cheesecloth or any breathable fabric secured with a rubber band around the mouth of the jar. A piece of an old cotton t-shirt, 2 layers of cheesecloth, a mesh lid. If you find one at a hardware store, it costs almost nothing. The main requirement is this. Water must be able to drain easily through this cover when you turn the jar upside down. That will come into play in the next steps. Metal lids with holes. Work. Plastic lids with small openings. Work. Any solution that keeps the contents inside but allows air and water to pass through works. Step 3. Choosing your beans. Here there is one rule, and it is absolute. Only whole, unprocessed mung beans. No split ones, no hulled ones, no quick cook varieties, none that have already been heat treated. Those are dead, they will not sprout. You need living beans. Whole, with their skin intact, green in color. It is in that skin that the embryo lives, the one that will launch the entire program. Where to buy them? At health food stores, at Asian grocery stores. They almost always carry them. In many regular supermarkets in the grains and legumes aisle. Online with delivery. Price, from $1 to $4 per kilogram depending on your region and the store. 1 kilogram of dry beans gives you a supply for roughly 2 to 3 months of daily use. Stored in a cool, dry place away from light, they keep for years without losing their ability to sprout. This is quite possibly the cheapest food on the planet relative to its nutritional value. Before use, rinse the beans under cold water and quickly sort through them. Remove any that are damaged, shriveled, or clearly not viable. There will not be many. The majority are ready to go. Step 4. Soaking. Pour about a quarter cup of dry beans into the jar. No more. They will expand to 3 to 4 times their volume, and the jar needs room. Cover with cold, clean water. Use about 3 times as much water as beans by volume. They will absorb a lot. Then leave them for 8 to 12 hours. The easiest approach is to do this at night. You go to sleep, the beans soak. You wake up, and they are already ready for the next step. What happens during those hours? The bean absorbs water and understands that it is time to sprout. Enzymes are activated that begin breaking down phytic acid and trypsin inhibitors, the very anti-nutrients we discussed earlier. Vitamin synthesis begins. Proteins start unfolding into more accessible forms. Soaking is not simply softening, it is a reboot of the bean's biochemistry, from storage mode into life mode. After soaking, you will notice that the beans have swollen noticeably and become lighter in color. Some will already show a tiny white tip, the embryo pushing its way out. That means everything is going exactly right. Step 5. Draining the water and why this is the most important moment? Here it is, the critical step where most people go wrong. Drain the water through the breathable cover, turn the jar upside down and shake it. Make sure all the water has come out. Then tilt the jar at a 45-degree angle with the mouth facing down and leave it that way. You can lean it against a wall, place it in a bowl, or use a dish drying rack. Why? So that the remaining moisture continues to drain. The beans need to stay damp, but must not sit in water. This is a fundamental distinction. If even a small amount of water pools at the bottom of the jar, you will get mold instead of sprouts. Because an anaerobic environment, meaning an environment without air circulation, plus warmth, plus moisture, is the ideal condition for bacterial growth, not for sprouting. Damp beans, open air, zero standing water, that is the formula for success. The jar should remain tilted with the mouth facing down until the next rinse. Not in direct sunlight, in shade or diffuse light. Room temperature, between 18 and 25 degrees. In heat, the process moves faster. In the cool, it slows down, but it works either way. What the process looks like. Day by day, day 1. You soak the beans in the evening and drain them in the morning. The beans are swollen and round, some already showing tiny white tips. Rinse with cold water, drain completely again, return to the tilted position. Twice a day, morning and evening, the same thing. Rinse with cold water, drain fully, return to the tilt. That is the entire routine. 30 seconds in the morning, 30 seconds in the evening, day 2. The tails have grown longer, 3 to 5 millimeters. The jar is beginning to fill up. The beans smell fresh, faintly grassy. That is a good sign. An unpleasant smell at this stage is a signal that water is pooling somewhere. Check the angle. Day 3. The tails reach 1 to 2 centimeters. The volume inside the jar has doubled compared to the starting amount. You can already taste them. Crunchy, fresh, with a light sweetness. Day 4 to 5. The optimal moment to eat them. Tails 2 to 4 centimeters long. The jar is tightly packed. Nutritional value is at its peak. The crunch is at its maximum. The flavor is neutral with a light freshness. Perfect alongside any dish. You can eat them immediately, or put them in the refrigerator. There they will keep for another 3 to 5 days, slowing their growth. The 3-jar system. How to harvest every single day. 1 jar is good. 3 jars is a system. Start a new jar every 1 to 2 days. While the first jar is ripening by day 5, the second is on day 3, and the third is just beginning. You always have fresh sprouts. Every day, without interruption. This is food independence in miniature. Your own personal conveyor belt of living food, running around the clock, requiring no electricity, never breaking down, never taking a day off. 3 jars, cheesecloth, 1 kilogram of beans. And you will never again look at wilting greens under supermarket fluorescent lights with the same trust you once had. In the final part, what all of this truly means. Why sprouts are not just food, but something much greater. There is a moment that happens around day 3. You walk up to the jar, you look inside, and you see that there is life. Not abstract, not metaphorical, literal, physical, visible life. Little white shoots that did not exist 3 days ago, that grew without soil, without sunlight, without anyone's help, simply because you gave them water and stayed out of the way. And in that moment, something clicks. Not in the jar, in you, because you suddenly understand something very simple and at the same time very important. Food is not something that gets produced somewhere out there. Food is something that happens, a living process, not a product on a shelf, and you have just become part of that process. This feeling is difficult to put into words, but those who have experienced it understand exactly what is being said. What this is really about. Let us be honest. We live in a world where food has become the longest and most opaque of all supply routes. Field, truck, factory, warehouse, distribution center, store, your plate. Between the moment when something was alive and the moment it reaches you, weeks, sometimes months, dozens of intermediaries, hundreds of kilometers, and countless decisions, not one of which you made. You do not know who grew your food. You do not know what it was treated with. You do not know how many days old it is. You trust the label, and the label was written by a marketer, not an agronomist. This is not paranoia. This is simply a description of how the modern food system works. And within that system, mung bean sprouts are an absolute exception. The distance from living to your plate, 30 seconds. That is exactly how long it takes to take the jar from the kitchen, rinse it under the tap, and transfer the contents to a bowl. 30 seconds. No truck, no warehouse, no marketer. You know everything about your food because you grew it yourself. The kilogram that feeds you in a crisis. 1 kilogram of dry mung beans costs between $1 and $4. Stored in a cool, dry place away from light, it keeps for up to 5 years without losing its ability to sprout. It requires no refrigerator, no special conditions, no particular packaging. And at any moment, in a year, in 2, in 3, you can take a handful of those beans, add water, and in 3 days you will have fresh, living, nutritious food. Think of it as insurance. Not anxious, not paranoid, simply sensible. In a world where supply chains sometimes break down, where food prices spike unpredictably, where situations arise when a store is simply not accessible, a kilogram of mung beans in the cupboard is not a can of preserves approaching its expiry date. It is a living food production system that activates on your command. 3 days, and you have fresh sprouts, under any circumstances, at any location where there is water. This is called food independence, and it fits inside a glass jar on your kitchen counter. What happens with children? There is a study conducted across several primary schools in different countries. Children were given the opportunity to grow food themselves, not in a garden, not as a long semester-wide project, but quickly and visibly. Sprouts are perfect for this. Results are visible within 2 days. The process is simple, and children can do everything on their own. The outcome surprised even the researchers. Children who had grown their own food ate it with a fundamentally different attitude. Foods they had previously refused to touch suddenly became interesting because it was theirs. They had done it. They had watched something edible appear from nothing, but the main thing was not that specific product. The main thing was what changed in their overall perception of food. Food stopped being something that simply appears on a plate. It became the result of a process, living, understandable, worthy of trust. If you have children, give them a jar. Give them a handful of beans. Explain 3 steps, and simply watch. What happens next is worth more than any conversation about healthy eating. Your kitchen is all of Asia. One of the most common questions. All right, I grew the sprouts. What do I do with them? The answer? Anything, literally. Raw in a salad, they add a crunch and freshness that no other ingredient can replicate. Mix with cucumber, sesame oil, soy sauce, and a squeeze of lemon juice. Done in 2 minutes, and that is genuine Asian cuisine right in your home. Stir-fried in a pan for 2 to 3 minutes. They soften slightly but keep a light crunch. Add garlic, ginger, a little soy sauce. This is a side dish that comes together faster than a kettle boils. In soup, add them in the final minutes of cooking so they do not overcook. Vietnamese po, tomato soup, chicken broth. Sprouts pair with any broth and add texture. In smoothies, yes, exactly. A handful of raw sprouts in a green smoothie barely changes the flavor, but adds protein, vitamins, and live enzymes. This is precisely what people pay enormous amounts of money for in health food stores. In rolls and bowls, the classic of Asian street food. Rice paper, a little cooked vermicelli, vegetables, sprouts, sauce. 5 minutes, and you have fresh Vietnamese spring rolls. All of Asian cuisine, one of the most complex, diverse, and celebrated culinary traditions in the world, is built on this product, not as an exotic addition, as a foundation. And now that foundation is in your home, in a jar, ready in 3 days. What is actually happening when you sprout a bean? Allow me to finish not with practical advice, but with a thought. When you sprout a bean, you are not manufacturing a product. You are not following a recipe. You are unlocking a program that is 4,000 years old, a program that Ayurvedic physicians use to restore the sick, that Chinese cooks pass down from generation to generation, that NASA sent into space. This program was always there, inside every little green bean. It was waiting for water. It was waiting for you. And here is what matters. In a world that is growing ever more complex, ever faster, and ever more dependent on systems you do not control, there is something incredibly valuable about holding in your hands something simple and alive. Something that operates by the laws of biology, not the laws of logistics. Something that cannot be switched off, delayed, or made more expensive. 3 jars in the kitchen, cheesecloth, water from the tap, and living food every single day. 1 step. Today. You do not need to overhaul your entire diet. You do not need to become vegan, read books on nutritional science, or buy expensive equipment. You need to take one action. Buy 1 kilogram of mung beans. Today, it costs less than a cup of coffee at a cafe. Find a jar with a wide mouth, cut a piece of cheesecloth, soak a handful of beans in water this evening, and in 5 days you will be eating something that did not exist at the beginning of this week. Something you grew, something alive, something that contains 24 times more vitamin C than the dry bean it started from. 5 days, 1 jar, 30 seconds of care per day. This is the hole in the system we talked about at the very beginning, and now you know how to step through it.